Hi everyone, I'm Lee from Island Biologicals and we're here this afternoon in the Crawford Valley and we're going to have a very quick run through at some of the simple things you can do to monitor your soil and your paddock on your farm. So the first thing we've done here today is we've set up a transect line. What we're trying to do is compare this same transect line every time that we come out and monitor. The reason for doing that is we only can compare like to like. We're not comparing the hill paddock with the flat paddock. We're just getting this transect line here today. Now, if you want to set up a number of these on your property, if you've got some quite variable geography or soil types, it's well worth having a few. But it's very important that to be comparing the same thing every time. Just as we said, we're just building a snapshot of what's going on our farm. So we've set up our transect here off an existing fence post. And I'd say that's a really handy thing to do in your paddock. If you're putting mobile things out there, they can be removed or knocked over by the tractor. So try and go from something that is here all the time. We've marked this with a piece of handy baling twine. What we're going to do off this point, apart from our transect, every time we do this, we're going to take ourselves a photo down our transect line. This is really important because we all think we remember things exactly as they were, but sometimes our memory's not quite as good as we thought. So this gives us a snapshot in different seasons, in different weather conditions, different stages of wet or dry, and we'll have the same thing every time. So if you're new to having a property or you've changed management or you're wanting to see what's changing, grass is growing, grass is not growing, this is a great visual way to see what's going on. So one of the first things I like to do is I like to take out this bit of snazzy kit called a penetrometer. Now this is measuring the resistance of being poked into the soil. It has a hydraulic meter in it, pointy end on it, don't stick it through your shoe. It's going to tell us roughly how we're going, whether our soil is tight or compact or very good. It's also, in a default way, a measurement of water penetration. So if your soil's been softened by the water, you'll find your penetrometer goes in really easily. It's a great way to find compaction layers. This morning we found a few rocks already as well. You get a little idea of what's below the surface without digging it up. So on this transect line, we've got a little bit of a range of what's in this paddock. We've got a few different things. So we've got this longer stuff that doesn't get run over with the tractor. So we'll start up here. We've also got a driving area, and then we've got some more managed stuff further down. So we get a little bit of an overview of an average of this paddock. So we just push it into the ground gently, and it measures the resistance as we go. So I've hit 300 PSI at about 6 inches on that. So that's 300 PSI is about the level that roots could easily make their way into that soil. So after that, it starts getting a bit harder. So that's kind of the extent of where we'd expect roots to go in that bit. Now, there could be a rock there or a tight layer. So we'll come out a few steps and have another look. Now we are in a road here, so we'll expect to see something a bit different. Right, so I've hit 300. Just past the tip. So that's quite a compacted area, and we'd expect that. The cars have driven over here, it's fine. Then we'll take another couple of paces down. We'll have another go. Right. We've hit a hard point. It feels like a rock at about 10 inches. And we can also see, interestingly, there's a lot of moisture down in that. So that's interesting to note. And we'll work our way down the line and get a bit of an average of what's going on in this paddock. Now you can see it comes with a very handy meter. Now green is where a plant can easily go. The end of the yellow is about where a plant's likely to go. So they can work their way down deeper, but they're the easy places for plants to grow. So we just built a picture of that. Now, as we've spoken about, if we came up here and it was very dry, we're going to see quite a different thing. And that's actually the point of this, to see how our paddock's going to perform in a range of different climatic variations. Right, so one of the other things I really like to do is a water infiltration test. And what we're trying to look at here is what will happen on this ground when it rains. So it's all good to say we got 25 mil of rain, but if 19 mil flowed off and down the gutter, we only got 6 mil of rain. So we're trying to see how efficient the rain that falls on this ground is. So we're going to test it in a really simple way. We've got a bit of high-tech 100 mil PVC pipe here. We've got our measuring cup. So we're going to test 25 mils of water, so as if an inch of rain had fallen on this ground now. So that's 196 mils in this diameter. Bear in mind, diameters change. Bit of circle geometry, back to your school days, you'll work out where you're at. Really basic, we're going to test 25 mil and then we're going to stick a second 25 mil in and see if we get much difference. So we time it as it disappears into the soil. We're going to do this on about 3 or 4 places down our transect. You can have a look at your anomalies. So say one disappeared really quickly, maybe you put it on a mouse hole or a crack in the ground, or one sat there forever. It's worth having a little look as to why that might have happened. So once again, building averages, looking at approximately how this section of our farm works. So we're going to take our pipe. It's got a little bit of a sharpened edge. We're still under our transect. We're just going to bump it into the ground. So that's in, so the water won't leak out the side. We're going to take our high quality stock trough water, put our 196 approximate mils in there. We're going to time this. So I get the stopwatches ready and away we go. So this is going pretty well. So our first inch of rain's taken 22 seconds to get into the ground. Now we're going to be pretty happy with that. It's setting us up for actually having water go in the ground. We can understand that's what happens. Now, we have had rain here, so it's really exciting to see this going in a bit quicker than we were thinking. If your rain's taking 25 minutes to soak in, you're probably going to lose a fair bit in the meantime, particularly on a slope like this. A lot will be gone. So that speaks really well to actually gaining water in our landscape. Now, if we hit a real dry time, that's when it's going to be most important. But interestingly, that's also when we see it sometimes taking the longest as the ground's compacted itself and dried out and sometimes become hydrophobic. So it's worth taking note of where you are climatically at the moment and where you've been for rainfall in the last little while. So we'll have a go at the second inch as well. So we can see that's sitting a bit longer. We're still good. We're still inside of 40 seconds at the moment, which is great, but it isn't disappearing as quickly. You can keep doing this all day if you want and see how much rain you can take. Yeah, we're going to call that about done at about 50 seconds there. So that's really great. That's great water infiltration. And it speaks well to what will happen here when it rains. We get to actually keep that rain rather than trying to send it back to the ocean straight away. So we're just going to have a little look of what's on our ground as far as ground cover goes as well. We're going to use this handy square. Now you can divide that up into 4 pieces if you want, with a piece of string across the sides, but we're not going to today. We're just going to have a look at what's in here. Now, we're going to do this about every 3 metres down our transect. It's a little bit random, but it's not throwing it over your shoulder and seeing where it lands. So we're going to land that one there. What we're going to look at inside of this quadrant is how much ground cover we've got and roughly what's in it. Now, there are more in-depth tests than you can do than this that will ask you about species and percentage of desirables and indicators of things that are alive. For the real simple stuff, monitoring, today we're just going to look at what percentage of ground cover we've got in this square. So if we look in here, visually from the surface, I can't see any bare ground, which is really great. If we get in there and start pulling the grass away so we can see through, I start to be able to see a very little bit of soil in there. There's pretty good mulch cover and grass cover. The grasses are quite close together. The sheep pooed there too, good on the sheep. But we're going to say we've probably got 90% cover on that spot. Now, once we've ascertained that, we're going to pick up and we're going to go 3 paces backwards at this stage. We're going to chuck it on the other side of us here. And we're going to repeat this process. So this way we're going to get an average up and down this line. And at the end of it, we can say, okay, what are we, 80, 90%? Now, if we do this over a period of time, we're going to see whether we're maintaining good cover, dry time, wet time, summer, winter. We're going to see what's going on. It is interesting to unwind it further and look into those other things that are in it too. So holistic management does a great example of what to monitor in those squares. The DPI LLS Handbook of Soil Health also goes further into it. Great to be used in conjunction with something like a pasture guide to identify percentage of desirable grasses versus percentage of stuff that might be less palatable. There's a whole range of stuff we can do with that. But on a very, very simple note, we're just going to look at ground cover. So something that I consider extremely worthwhile is good old shovel. Take a shovel. Now, today we're on our transect, but I'd suggest taking a shovel whenever you're going for a walk in the paddock. Don't limit yourself to the transect on this. This is a really valuable way to see what's going on beneath the ground. So we look at grass, we tend to look at the top. We look at growth upwards, etc., etc. If things are changing, often they're going to change below the ground first. It's really, really simple and worthwhile just to see what's going on to good old shovel. We can also use the shovel to measure soil resistance in the same way we were using the penetrometer. You get a real picture of what's going on there by how hard it is to dig that hole. Right, so I've got a nice little square of soil. We're going to have a bit of a look of how it looks visually. We're going to pull it apart a bit. We're going to see where the roots went. We're going to have a little look for what's alive and what's not. Now, this is pretty tightly pulled together. And there's roots, a good 150, 200 mil in. So we're going to, this is going to help build our picture of what we're doing. We got great visual indicator that things are going okay here. We've got a worm. So worth noting, wherever you go, earthworm numbers, they're a fantastic indicator that things are going okay. One in a shovel, yeah, you wouldn't say that's high, and it isn't. But if you go 20 shovels and don't find one, then that's a really good indicator. Maybe things could be better. Multiples in a shovel, fantastic. And I don't mean the ones cut in half either. So I can have a little look at the texture. I reckon this is not bad because it's kind of broken up, like which would speak to why our water's going in there. There's pore spaces in there as well. Now, our roots are really holding that all together. A bit will fall off, but it's not all going to disappear out there. So I can say that's going okay. Roots, we got 100, 150 below the surface. They're a bit brown and not a little bit of riser sheath on them, but not a great deal. But it is June, so we're going to say they're probably not in a very active growing phase. So we've got to take that into account. Once again, it's just building a picture of what's going on, not trying to judge it exactly for now, but get a bit of a picture. We do have almost complete root coverage throughout the whole thing. We don't have any gaps where the roots don't seem to want to go. Okay, we've got another worm in there, so that's going well as well. I know we've only dug down to maybe a foot. We don't have any real changes in soil colour or texture. It's all very, very similar stuff, so good on your team worm. We appear to have a worm egg there as well. Succession planting for the worm. We'll just sit here and pull this whole thing apart and see what's going on. I'd suggest you do this on all sorts of places. A bit that's growing really well, a bit that's not growing all that well at all, a weed, a grass, whatever. If you want, there's another worm. So I'm going to rate this reasonably well. I've been to this farm before, and it's the first time really that I've seen a number of worms. So I reckon this is going forwards. I'm really happy with that. But also see we've got moisture lower down, so the ground is sort of saturated. Like you can see by it sticking to my hands that it is a pretty wet time. Put this into your snapshot with your penetrometer and your infiltration. We really get to start to get a picture of what's going on. As we looked at ground cover before, we've got the ground cover above and below. So this soil is really not going to flow anywhere, even if water goes across the surface rapidly. We're not going to lose that soil anywhere. Some of the other tests, another worm, fantastic. Other tests like the rash test will go into the soil texture and the makeup of the parent material a whole lot more. That's a little more complex and it is worth doing, but it isn't a simple thing that you're going to do a couple of times a year. That's one to sit down and really get your teeth into. So we see a whole lot more than we'd ever have seen if we just looked at the surface. Real simple action, get a lot out of it. Okay, so they're just some very, very basic things that we can have done to just see where we are. Now, it'd be good to keep a record of those, as well as the photo that we've taken. Now, this is a great thing you can do maybe 4 times a year when the BAS statement's due, give you something to do instead of doing tax. That's taken us about 15 minutes in total. You could get around 10, 12 transects on your property in half a day. That's really not a very big time constraint. Your land's your biggest asset that you've got. It's really worth keeping an eye on if it's which direction you think it's travelling. Is it getting better with the management practices being applied? Are there other things we could be doing? Are there things we could be doing differently? They're all worth considering. And this snapshot gives you something to work with to base those decisions on. So there are some really handy kits available from local land services that will give you most of the tools that you need for this. There's also some further resources in that. There's also some really good resources on the internet, the rash test, the holistic management monitoring, the step test, the feed budgeting and so on, that you could add to this as you do it. That will help you build a much bigger picture. But for simplicity, those couple of things we've done today will really give you an overview of what you're up to. Thanks for listening.